Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a totally fascinating case study on the psychological turning points of language learning. You know, we so often think about learning a new language as just, memorizing endless vocabulary lists or grinding through strict grammar rules. But the reality? The most profound milestones happen entirely inside the learner's mind. Today, we're using a real language learner's Day 5 journal entry as our lens. It's this incredibly candid, real-time look at what it actually feels like when a new language stops being just a subject you study and really starts becoming a part of how you think. Okay, let's dive into this because this opening thought from our learner perfectly captures that elusive, kind of messy, transitional phase of acquiring a new skill. They note that the day didn't feel like a massive triumph, nor was it a frustrating failure. It just felt strange and different. What they're describing here is the very first sensation of an internal mental shift. For the first time since they began their journey, just 5 days prior, they noticed a tiny change happening inside their mind. It's that subtle moment where the gears in your brain start turning in a completely new direction.
Section 1. The Translation Trap.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what's going on under the hood. To understand why that initial mental shift is so huge, we first have to look at the massive hurdle standing in the way, which is the immense cognitive load of mental translation. Our learner broke down their exact mental model whenever they tried to speak English, and it was a rigorous 4-step process. Step 1, the thought originates in their native language, Hindi. Step 2, they actively try to translate that thought. Step 3, they find the English words, and finally, Step 4, they actually speak. This specific translation trap is a massive bottleneck. The learner explicitly points out that because their brain was working through this rigid sequence, they were always forced to speak slowly. I mean, your brain is essentially doing double the work just to get a single sentence out. Section 2, the breakthrough moment. But then, on day 5, the routine was broken. While practicing basic sentences, they noticed that a few words came directly in English. There was no step 1, no step 2. Just English. They completely bypassed the translation phase. Now, they admit that this pure, untranslated thought lasted for literally only a few seconds, but the emotional impact of this tiny victory, it was absolutely huge. It actually made them smile. For someone who was previously terrified to speak even a single sentence, feeling their brain finally starting to adapt to the language without needing that native language crutch was a monumental victory. So, how did they capitalize on this? Well, they decided to push further and actively leave their comfort zone. Instead of just passively watching videos, which, let's be honest, is where a lot of us get stuck, they started actively talking to themselves in English throughout their daily routine, while drinking water, while walking, while using their phone. They started using incredibly simple sentences like, I am feeling tired, I need more practice, or what should I learn today? By narrating their mundane, everyday actions, they were forcing their brain to think in English little by little. It's a perfect example of shifting from passive consumption to active, real-world application.
Section 3. Redefining True Fluency.
Naturally, speaking out loud all day leads to making errors. During this active practice, the learner admits they made a lot of mistakes. Sometimes they forgot words right in the middle of a sentence, and sometimes their grammar broke down entirely. But unlike day 1, where those errors might have caused immense shame or frustration, by day 5, they found themselves actually laughing at their own mistakes. They internalized a powerful lesson. Mistakes are simply a necessary part of the learning process. They are absolutely not proof of failure. This release of shame is exactly what allowed them to keep the momentum going. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the author completely redefines fluency using that newfound acceptance of mistakes. We usually think of fluency as having a perfect vocabulary and flawless grammar, right? But our learner realized something deeply profound. Fluent people are not fluent because they know every single word in the dictionary. They're fluent because they keep speaking even when they don't know the word. Fluency in this context is all about continuous momentum. It's about not freezing up when you hit a roadblock, but rather finding a way around it and keeping the conversation alive. Section 4. Building confidence through practice. Looking at the concrete results of this new momentum-driven mindset, the author lists the 5 specific new words they learned on day 5. And if you look closely, these words perfectly mirror their internal psychological state. Comfortable, they were learning to leave their comfort zone. Habit, they were building the habit of speaking out loud. Improve, they were noticing their own mental shifts. Journey, they recognized this was a process, not an overnight fix. And finally, confidence. These aren't just random vocabulary words, They are an exact reflection of the mental leaps they achieved that very day. So the crucial point is this one beautiful, hard-earned realization that stayed in our learner's mind all day long. Practice creates confidence. They explicitly note that confidence does not come from natural talent. It certainly doesn't come from perfection. The only thing that generates true confidence is the relentless, messy, mistake-filled act of practicing. Let's move to and see how this builds by looking at the hard evidence. At night, the author watched a video recording of themselves from day 1 and compared it to day 5. The contrast was stark. On day 1, they looked nervous, their voice was physically shaking, and their confidence was sitting at almost 0. But by day 5, the improvement was undeniable. The key takeaway here is that the visible improvement wasn't that they were suddenly speaking perfect English. Not at all. The visible improvement was stronger confidence and an acceptance of their own mistakes. And this brings us to the core thesis of their day 5 entry. Even though they openly admit that they still struggle, they still pause, and they still make mistakes, English is finally becoming a real part of their daily life. Why? Because they've realized that perfect grammar isn't the starting line. Confidence is. Confidence is the very first real step toward true fluency, because confidence is exactly what allows you to open your mouth and try in the first place. Which leaves us with a question. To turn this incredible epiphany outward, we've seen how narrating small, mundane actions, like drinking water or taking a walk, sparked a massive mental shift for our learner. So think about your own learning journey. Right now, whether it's a language, a professional skill, or a personal hobby, what small, imperfect habit will you practice today to build your own confidence? Remember, you don't need perfection. You just need practice. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I absolutely can't wait to explore our next topic with you.